You're listening to The Hikam with Shaykh Zahir Bacchus of the Law Tree Foundation. In this podcast, Shaykh Zahir explains the aphorisms from Ibn Ata'illah's famous book of wisdoms, Al-Hikam Al-Ata'iyah, a classical manual of spiritual development. Visit seekershub.org for online courses, our reliable answer service, and engaging media.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما بفضلك وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. We're in number 73 of the Hikam of Ibn Ata'illah. And we started it last week, and I said I will continue. So he says, إذا أردت أن تعرف قدرك عنده فانظر في ماذا يقيمك. So he said, Shaykh Ibn Ata'illah, he said, if you want to know your worth with him, with Allah, if you want to know your worth with Allah, look at which he keeps you in, or look at which he keeps you. فانظر في ماذا يقيمك. Look at what he keeps you, or that in which he keeps you. So, why should the servant, there's a question. We talked about some of the mechanics last week. We talked about why should you want to know. Why is it that the believer should want to know their place with Allah? Or if you want to know, or why should the believer want to know where their place is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Where do you stand with Allah? Why? Why should you want to know where you stand with your Lord? You should want to know, and a servant will want to know. What type of servant will want to know that? The type of servant who knows the reality, and the reality is that we will all stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one that will pass judgment on us. It's only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why. Why should you want to know what your worth is with Allah, where you stand with your Lord? It's because your Lord is the one who will make that final decision, and He's the only one that will make the decision of whether you will prosper in the next world, whether you're going to attain into felicity in the next world. And the next world is going to be eternal. The next world is going to be eternal. What is the opposite then in this world? And what should you not then concern yourself with? There is a concern. The concern is that you look at where Allah is, and what you are worth with Allah. And so he says, if you want to know that, look at what He has established you in, or look at what in which He keeps you. Look at which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept you. What has He kept you in? Has He kept you in ibadah? Has He kept you in sin? Has He kept you in ibadah? Because the branches, once you start asking questions, you can keep asking yourself questions, and you should. You should. Has He kept you in ibadah so that you may be fooled into thinking that you are on the right path? Has He kept you in sin so that you may call upon Him with forgiveness day and night? What has He established you in? And why has He established you in that? Or why are you in that? What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want for you in what He has established you in? Your worth to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what you have put into your obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your worth with Allah is what you have put into your obedience, and the reason for putting in your obedience. Not just putting in your obedience. Why should you put in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Why should you put in worship? Why should you obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Why should you want a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Why? And this is if you want to know your worth. He doesn't say, Shaykh ibn Ata'illah, if you want to know the worth of someone else, because that doesn't matter. When you stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will stand by yourself. We will stand by ourselves. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to humiliate us, He will have us in earshot of others. Others will be in earshot of us if He wants to humiliate us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from it. But we will be standing before Allah and answering before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the judgment will pass to us. Each judgment will be passed to an individual, to every single one of us individually, not as a group of people. Your judgment is not based on how other people are judged. Your judgment is based on yourself. On yourself. What is the opposite in this world? Because it's opposite. This world has to be the opposite. Because that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it. If this world was not the opposite, you would not flee from this world. If this world was not the opposite, then it would not be ghurur. It would not be deception and illusion. If this world was not the opposite, it would last forever. No, it's the opposite. It's the opposite. Shaykh ibn Ata'illah wants you to focus on what is going to come in the akhirah. And that is your worth with Allah. Not what other people think. What other people think of you is meaningless. What other people think of what you do is meaningless. What other people may categorize you is meaningless. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never ask someone on the Day of Judgment, what do you think of this person? No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never ask, what do you think about that person? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. He's the one who will make the judge. He's the judge. He will make the judgment. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This world, people concentrate on other people to their own detriment. They concentrate more about what other people are doing, what other people are saying, what other people are practicing, what other people are this, what other people are that. That's what they concentrate in this world. That's the opposite of the next world. They concentrate in this world. Believers, as Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu said, we mentioned some hadith and ayahs last week. He said, take account of yourself before being taken to account. تحاسب نفسك قبل أن يحاسب. Take account of yourself. تحاسب. Take account of yourself. Look at yourself. قبل أن يحاسب. Before He takes you to account. Before who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes you to account. Take account of yourself. Taking account of yourself means what? Look at your worth with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has established you in? What has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala established you in? What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want you to gain from what He has established you in? Does He want you to gain in something? You may be someone who is praying. You may be someone who is doing all of this ibadah. But does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want you to strive for something more? Look at yourself during the ibadah. Don't just look at the form. Look at that which He keeps you in. It doesn't just mean look at the form of what you're doing. Look internally at what you're doing also. You may be a person who prays 5 times a day. You may be someone who stands. Look internally into it. What is it that you leave after the prayer with? What is it that you think about after the prayer? Has your life been affected when you go back home after 5 daily prayers and you prayed it? Are you different than how you started in the morning? Are you different? Do you think differently? Or do you speak differently? Do you act differently? So, what Allah has established you in, what Allah has kept you in, what Allah keeps you in, is not just what Allah keeps you in from your physical makeup, from the actions that you do on your limbs. No, is what also is the internal side of those actions. What is the internal side of those deeds? What is it that you gain from it? And have you gained something from it? Have you gained something from it? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could want more for you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could want more for you. And if you look at your worth with Him, if you look at your worth, and how do you know your worth with Allah? Look at the things that He keeps you in, or He established you in. And look at what He wants more of. Look at what He wants you to do better of. Look at what He wants you to gain more, or what He wants you to be realized in, or what He wants you to thank Him for, or what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to be grateful for. Look at it. Look at all those things. A servant who is mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a servant who does not look beyond his own nose. A servant who is mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not a servant who looks beyond his own nose in terms of criticism, in terms of critiques, in terms of help. He'll look beyond his nose because he wants to be helpful, because he wants to take care of the needs of others, because he wants to help others, or he wants to serve others. He'll look beyond it. As of internally to himself and his relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will not look beyond himself. He will not look beyond himself. Because you need, that servant wants to be realized with what? Knowledge of Allah, ma'rifatullah. He wants to be realized in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't come about overnight. It comes about with effort. What effort? It comes about with the effort of your limbs and of your intention, of your mind and of your heart being connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during it. That's the phases that it comes about in. That's the phases that it comes about in. And so one has to look and determine in oneself where is your worth, or what is your worth with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What is your worth with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What are you worth with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? If you move away from the public domain, if you move away from the gaze of people, and you're home and you're by yourself, what is it that goes through your thoughts? What is it that comes to your heart? What is it that keeps you going? What is it that keeps you going in terms of your relationship with Allah? What is it that keeps you going? What keeps us going in this world is that we have house payments, we have bills to pay, we have this to do, we have these people to take care of. That keeps us going in this world. That keeps us waking up in the morning going to work. That keeps us doing what we have to do to have some part of this dunya. But what keeps you going when it comes to wanting success in the akhirah? What keeps you going? What is it that keeps you going? And that you have to determine. That you have to determine yourself. What keeps you going? What should keep you going is that you want to become close to Allah. That you want to experience love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That should keep you going. Is that you want to be enraptured with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That you want your Lord. And if you want that, If you want that, then you have to connect the outward actions with the interior reality. And then the interior reality is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ, he said even when his eyes were shut and he was sleeping, he was still awoke, he was still awake with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning that outwardly he was asleep, inwardly he was conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inwardly he was still conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inwardly. So he was always conscious of Allah. There was not a gap or a state of ghafla, of heedlessness, or not knowing one's Lord, or not being mindful of one's Lord. There's always that state of remembrance, always that state of knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There was always that state of one's knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We live in a world where it's focused on ourselves for the wrong reason. We live in a time in which people focus on themselves in terms of acuity to this dunya, to this world, in terms of their success in this world and prosperity in this world, and wanting themselves to be ahead of people in comparison to others. We live in a society, in a time in which it's the nafs taken over. And the downside of the nafs is that you want to promote the outer self. You want to promote the outer self at the detriment of the inner self, at the detriment of the heart. And to promote the outer self and to become something special in the eyes of others is putting down others. That's what we live in. That's the time that we live in. People put down others, critique the actions of others, and so on. Do horrible things to others. Horrible things to others. Because they want to seem like they're important. Or they want to know that they want people to think, or themselves to think they're better than others. No, think you're a servant. If you think you're an abd, if you think you're a slave of Allah, then act like a slave to Allah. A slave to Allah does not move unless he's commanded. A slave does not run unless he's commanded. A slave does not look to others because he has a master. If someone realizes that they have a master and they realize their slavehood, they would not look at others. They wouldn't. They would not look at others. They would only look at their master because they know their freedom is in the hands of their master. That's what they know. They know their freedom is in the hands of their master, who feeds them and who clothes them and who takes care of them. That's what they'll know. That's what they know. That's a servant. That's what a servant should know. If someone does not know that, someone does not realize that, then you could question your servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Question your servitude. Question it and then correct it. Question your servitude and then correct it. The only one to be concerned about is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's it. That's the only one to be concerned about. Who cares what happens next door? Who cares what other people are doing or thinking about? Does that matter? That doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. What does that matter? Because it's not going to matter on Yawm al-Qiyamah. It's not going to matter on Yawm al-Qiyamah. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who establishes us, even in our work. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who establishes us in our work. So does it matter what people think, what they do, what others are doing? Doesn't matter. If Allah wants to keep you there, He'll keep you there. If He wants to remove you, He'll remove you without knowing the secret plans of the employer or the secret plans of the employee or what they're planning to do. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Act like a servant and be like a servant and think like a servant, and then you will be a servant. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us, guide us, forgive us, have mercy upon us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of our brothers, our sisters, our elders, our parents, give them good health, long life. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us in closeness and practice to Him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us and guide us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring us close to Him, far away from the shaitan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala establish us in what is good for us in the akhirah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us wanting Him and wanting desire to be close to Him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our parents. Those who have passed away, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them His mercy, His maghfirah and His shade. Those who are sick or ill, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heal them and cure them, remedy them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala our children, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve them, protect them on His path. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help them to serve this ummah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive them and protect them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala establish all of us in His path of success. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala those who are traveling for His sake, for your sake, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect them, guide them, forgive them, protect their families. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them patience in their travel, help them to remember us in their dua. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide their hearts to the deen and bring them back to us healthy and strong. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finding their families in the best of states, in the best of situations. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve their families as they travel. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect their families as they travel. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive them, protect them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our friend Shaykh Boro during his travel and his family. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect him, keep him safe, travel him safe, bring him back safe. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take him to where he's going in the best of states and bring him back in the best of states. Take him in the best of health and bring him back in the best of health. سبحانك وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.
Thank you for listening to The Hikam with Shaykh Zahir Bacchus. Help Seekers Hub spread the light of guidance to millions around the world by supporting us through monthly donations by going to seekershub.org/donate. Your donations are tax deductible in the US and Canada.